Okay, brilliant. So a new collaborative approach to employability. Um, I've authored, co-authored. I'm the main author, but also with collaboration with a couple of other colleagues. Let me go to the next slide. Um, I um, I have a focus on student employability. Let me skip to the next slide. Sorry. Just let me say I've spent 25 years in industry. I've had a couple of my own businesses. Started a business up in my last year of university, sold that, put all the money into a nightclub. Tell students, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Went back to university to do an MSc, and then went the corporate life, Sage, Pegasus, and 15 years at IBM, and I finished divisional marketing director. But for 19 of the years, I was working 50% at university because I have a passion for theory into context, from having employed students for over 22 years for graduates and junior managers. Some really great people, some really bright people. I needed them to be able to articulate what they'd learned and how it was going to be a benefit to me in my division. And I rarely found that. And I was also a bit frustrated with the arrogance of the companies I worked for that thought, forget what universities teach you. They don't care. We're going to teach you how to do business. We're going to teach you how to do marketing, how to do commerce, which I always found a bit arrogant. So that's the premise that I come from. And I always thought there was a different way of designing a curriculum. I hear from many colleagues that are in business and senior positions that, yeah, universities, yes, they teach critical thinking, conceptual analysis, and students see things through different lenses. And that's really important, and we value that. But with the trend of most business school students being, especially in the marketing profession, but business schools generally, being towards smaller businesses, sub 500 person companies that don't have that regular cycle of training and the rotation schemes of deep dive learning. It was a focus on SMEs. So there's lots of information in the press, lots of student employability process. Nearly half of university students unprepared for employment, an article in Prospects from a couple of years ago. And this is an iterative trend that I hear from many of my ex-colleagues that are in industry, and not just big companies, but small companies as well. So I wanted to look at this in further detail. So the research questions that I wanted to look at, what's the process for designing an enhanced employability relevant HE experience for students? It's around collaboration, a collaborative curriculum between an organisation and a university. Now, there is a body of academic knowledge around co-creation of curriculum with students and the university, but very little with industry. Yes, there may be for certain areas like nursing and medicine and with law, but very little around commerce. And the businesses, they are sponges, they are desperate for students who come out, bright students, but who have knowledge of what they do. And I looked at three main areas, so Kolb, experiential learning, generational theory, so Friedman, and stakeholder theory. My sample, I looked at three different areas. One was very sensitive, the academics, because I knew that when I engaged in that area, they would constantly think you are such an imposter, David Gordon. You may be a doctor, an associate professor, but you still think in a very positivistic and capitalist way. But my three cohorts, so SMEs, 25 SMEs, semi-structured interviews, I looked at smaller companies, and these had to be organizations that had previously employed commercial students. So commercial in its widest sense, it could be accounting, finance, it could be commercial angle of law. And then looking at graduates. that had graduated not from De Montfort University I was at, but a spectrum of universities in the UK. And it had to be in the past 5 years. I needed graduates who were able to remember their study, that would still have some of that knowledge of what they'd learned, hopefully more than, I know a lot of my colleagues say 5 years, it's virtually all gone from graduates, unless you learn philosophy or psychology, something that stretches the mind in such a way that you'll never forget how to think that way, which we know from a level 8 study that happens to students. Unless that happens, there's a strong depletion of information. And then the last cohort was the academics. And again, I was cautious about this area. I had to be quite careful of my questioning and what implications and inferences they drew rather from my research. So all semi-structured interviews. Now, a lot of this was done quite recently. Some of the knowledge was gained in about a year ago. So it actually helped with all of the analysis of the coding and decoding, it being transcribed. Without going into too much detail, so I've marked out the 3 areas in red. So the key research and discussion themes. So for the SME marketing, I looked at SME marketing needs. So sub 250 company, what were their marketing needs? I did have an influence on marketing, but view this as total commerce. What were the business needs? The actual type of things that were performed. Now, in business schools, we don't know where people are going. We don't know what industries, what particular skills, what nuances. We hear of students getting great jobs and doing things that university didn't train them for. And maybe it was a kind of separate learning, a separate additional skill. I looked at the university business curriculum co-creation, the actual central core question. And then I looked at the relevancy of marketing graduates. So again, commercial graduates, think to SMEs. And within those 3 different cohorts, there were some interesting areas. So the themes. So how relevant do you feel the students' learning has been for your business? What do you feel about a curriculum based on theory and current context, so that organizations have a direct impact and input into the lectures, into not just obligatory guest lectures, but they take part in them, they record some of them. In seminars, they are based on live themes that an organization is experiencing right now in a business. So that, and especially assessments, authentic assessments, it had to be live. And my aim was to create a thinking that graduates in their applications could say, yeah, I learned ABC and XYZ and got good grades. I've learned this, but I've actually done this. Forget it was an assessment. If it was authentic assessment, it was live. It was an actual live situation. I've learned this, I've done this, I could do this for you tomorrow. And then just a couple of other things. So what skills did you most want to learn from your degree, from graduates? And what value do you feel authentic assessments would add to your university learning? And then lastly, from the academics. So to what extent do you feel curriculum should be designed with the input of SME businesses? And again, a sensitive subject. There was a spectrum of academics from a range of Northeastern universities, some London universities, some West Midlands universities. And then again, one around curriculum co-creation. So the output from this. So the explicit themes, and I've grouped them into 4 areas. So theory, context interaction, employability enhancement, curriculum design value, and industry influence. I'm just going to go through the ones in red. The there was a feeling, very strong feeling, there was a theory context disconnect. So a disconnect between university theory and actually the business context. And I'm not suggesting that universities should be flooded with ex-industry people. We know that in most universities there are a number of academics that have migrated from industry, still have industry connections. There are obviously KTP projects, there are guest lectures and what have you. But nowhere have I seen in my research that there is a co-constructed curriculum. And without moving on, the importance of this is really found from many, many years of research into open days with other universities and colleagues, where a lot of the stakeholder influence, whether it'll be family or it'll be friends or it'll be carers and what have you, that co-constructing that industry involvement, not just business, it could be health and life science, it could be engineering, it could be computing, but that actual industry influence in the curriculum would add extra value and cachet to a course. There was a strong feedback around technology, and this is not just marketing, but commercial technology in general, the importance of technology familiarity. Now, we all have students that take notes faster with their thumbs and they can write, and that's just how it is. But the actual teaching, not of which buttons to press, but of strategically, conceptually, how would the technology fit into an organization? Where would it be most effectively used? Fourth one, authentic assessment value. Massive feedback around this, overriding feedback. So the recognition that live contextual university assessments provide a value. And then an articulation, so SME, large company, focus, disconnect. Commerce, SMEs found, and I know this from even large companies saying this from my days with corporates, there is a feeling that universities teach almost myopically around big branded businesses. So let me go on to the next slide. Some of the underlying themes that I wasn't really expecting, and again, I've highlighted some in red. So the need for a placement year substitute. I know from years of employing students, from colleagues employing graduates and junior managers now, that not enough people do a placement. Manchester Metropolitan years ago used to have a course, I think it was retail marketing, where the last term and the summer of your first year, and then in the third year, the summer and the first term in the third year was a placement. You basically got very little holiday, got only a few weeks holiday, but you had a pre-organized nearly a year's worth of experience. And I had an ex-colleague who did that many years ago. That has always held a special place, thinking that model, that inclusion. So I think that's really, really important. Need for a placement year substitute, almost like a placement year proxy. And a couple of people did use that word proxy, which I've included in here. So key knowledge, implementation and decline. There was a number of people, number of the SMEs that expressed a view that by the time we teach management and strategy, but a lot of graduates, when they go into business, it's going to be a number of years, if at all, when they get into a line management position. And by that time, A, they may have forgotten, and B, the business won't do it that way anyway. So they weren't discrediting what universities were teaching, that the foundational concepts and familiarity in the blueprint was important, but there needed to be some recognition that actually a number of our graduates will never be line managers, will never get to that stage. There was importance of generational impact of marketing. So millennials and Gen Z, they have avoiding commercial technology. Again, this apparent theme, and the retention of core concepts. And this is similar to the one on the previous page, but it was expressed in a way that a number of SMEs explained that it was refreshingly valuable to have graduates in their business that could articulate conceptual models, that conceptual way of thinking, but apply to a business situation. A number of SMEs, they just loved that. Not that they were latent academics, but they found it a refreshing view, a very different lens to view their business through. So that was the output. The model that was produced, a conceptual model of all the stakeholders. The one stakeholder that I didn't get any research from were the parents at Open Days. I intended to do that, but a lockdown happened. I didn't know how long it was going to go on for, and it was just too timely. But that would be a corollary, a corollary form of investigation. I won't read through this, but the actual co-curriculum process, I'm doing it partly on a couple of modules already in De Montfort University, and it's working. It is the talking point in any Open Day. I get emails from parents after Open Days to say, love this, that this is real, this is absolute, this replaced the placement year, and this is a total synthesis of conceptual academic thinking and commercial practice. And I think there's been a couple of comments, how do we know which industries, which companies? We don't know where people are going, but there has rarely been any research to say, I know this from being on the other side of the fence. I've never ever been asked, and I've asked many colleagues for years, has anyone at any university ever said to you, what are the top 20 things that graduates do commercially in their first 2 years of education? They never do. They never do. And that's what I'm kind of focusing on with half my lens on my previous roles. So some of the contributions, so better understanding of marketing curricular development for SMEs. So a comprehensive stakeholder-based model depicts the framework for co-constructed curricula. Employability relevance of technology, that came over loud and clear. A cross-industry validation of the graduate commercial awareness and employability value of authentic assessments, and industry validated conceptual development that a co-constructed curriculum and a close industry alignment can provide a placement year substitute. And then very lastly, implications. Pervasive business engagement. It provides complexity ready graduates. All faculty members need to be involved with this. It can't be myopic, polarized concentration on this area. Yes, it needs to be trialed. It needs to be sampled in the way that we normally perform postgraduate research, but that it needs to be in a kind of commercial sense, and the messages from the chief executive are conversed completely in a company, and people not just toe the line, but people are on board with the train. Multi-effective co-created curriculum. Students require a steady stream of experiential micro moments of experience, not just the study, not just a case study, even if it's a recent case study, to actually experience something that's live in the Kolb sense, and importantly be able to articulate this in an interview afterwards. It raises student engagement and interest, and boosts university involvement and discussion. I've lived this. I know it does. It's the students being able to engage, not always happily, but in that almost minor consultative with a small C sense. And lastly, so experience that can replace a placement year. So having real world SME experience should be a part of any commercial degree. And then lastly, student placement year is replaced, so it's a proxy. So the implications, and that's me done.